The scent of salt and pine from the Lakeside Haven, our vacation home, usually filled me with a serene joy. It was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a repository of 2 decades of memories, laughter, and the quiet intimacy Mark and I had once shared. It was where our children, now grown, had taken their first steps on the sandy patch by the water, where we'd celebrated anniversaries with cheap champagne and whispered dreams under star-strewn skies. So, when the meticulously curated illusion of my marriage began to crack, the haven became the silent, unwilling stage for the first act of my awakening. Mark had been distant, not in an obvious, explosive way, but with a subtle cooling, a gradual drift. His business trips became more frequent, his explanations for late nights more elaborate, bordering on fantastical. I'm an accountant by trade, a partner in a mid-sized firm I'd co-founded. Numbers talk to me, patterns emerge where others see chaos. And the patterns in Mark's behavior, in our joint accounts, were screaming a dissonant tune. The first concrete clue was a credit card statement I wasn't supposed to see, one for a card he'd sworn he'd canceled. Lavender lingerie from a boutique I'd never heard of. Dinners at restaurants far too intimate for client meetings, hotel stays in our own city. It was a clumsy, arrogant trail, and I followed it with a cold, methodical precision that surprised even myself. I hired a private investigator, a discreet woman named Ms. Albright, recommended by a colleague who'd navigated her own messy divorce. Her reports were clinical, detached, yet each one landed like a physical blow. The photographs of Mark, my Mark, laughing, kissing, his hand intimately placed on the back of a younger woman, a woman named Crystal, apparently his executive assistant, shattered the remaining vestiges of my denial. The pain was a living thing, coiling in my chest, stealing my breath. But beneath the agony, a different emotion began to stir, a glacial rage. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the profound disrespect, the assumption of my ignorance, my passivity. He was squandering our shared resources, our future, on this tawdry affair. The Haven. It was our most significant shared asset, aside from our primary residence. We'd bought it outright years ago, a reward for a particularly successful business venture of mine. The deed was in both our names. My mind, trained to find solutions and mitigate risk, began to churn. Divorce was inevitable, but I wouldn't be a victim dragged through the mud. I would be strategic. My company, Precision Financial Solutions LLC, was more than just my professional identity. It was a legal entity I controlled entirely. Over the next few weeks, while Mark was away on business, shacked up with Crystal, I consulted with my lawyer, David. He was a sharp, no-nonsense man who'd handled my company's legal affairs for years. Sarah, transferring jointly owned property without the other party's explicit, knowing consent is tricky, often impossible, and can be easily contested, David had warned, his brow furrowed. I understand that, David, I replied, my voice steady. But Mark has given me power of attorney for various financial matters over the years. We signed a broad one when I was restructuring some of our investments. He barely glanced at it, just said, "You handle the numbers, Han. You know I trust you." The memory, once a testament to our supposed partnership, now tasted like ash. I need you to review it. See if it grants me enough authority to act on his behalf for this specific transaction, if structured correctly. Perhaps a sale to my LLC at fair market value, documented meticulously. David spent days poring over the documents. The power of attorney was indeed broad, designed for me to manage our portfolio effectively, including real estate transactions. Mark, in his lazy arrogance, had signed away more control than he realized. "It's feasible," David finally conceded, a note of reluctant admiration in his voice. "We can structure it as a sale from Mark and Sarah Miller to Precision Financial Solutions LLC. The funds for his half of the purchase will be drawn from an account solely in your name, then redeposited to a joint account to show consideration, even if it's essentially your money cycling. It's clean, legally defensible, especially given his current distractions." He's unlikely to scrutinize joint account statements from that period with any real attention if he thinks it's just usual investment shuffles. The process was nerve-wracking. Every signature, every notarized document, every wire transfer, carefully timed when Mark was supposedly in a no-reception zone on a company retreat, felt like walking a tightrope. I was meticulous, ensuring every I was dotted, every T crossed. The sale was registered, the deed updated. Lakeside Haven was now owned, lock, stock, and barrel, by Precision Financial Solutions LLC, my LLC. I tucked the new deed away, a silent bomb ticking. Mark, oblivious, continued his charade. He'd become almost jovial, likely relieved that I hadn't found out, or was too daft to notice. He'd even started talking about us spending more quality time at the Haven soon, a suggestion so galling it took all my willpower not to react. The call from Ms. Albright came on a Tuesday. "Sarah," she said, her voice crisp, "Mark booked a 2-week trip. Flights to a small regional airport near Lakeside Haven, car rental, the works. And he booked it with Crystal. They're calling it their pre-honeymoon apparently. He told her he's leaving you, and the Haven is his gift to her." A gift. Our Haven. He was going to give our memories, our sanctuary, to his mistress. The audacity was breathtaking. The glacial rage I'd been nursing flared into a white-hot inferno. My plan, initially a defensive financial maneuver, now took on a sharper, more satisfying edge. Revenge. "Thank you, Ms. Albright," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Send me the itinerary. And your final invoice." They were due to arrive at the Haven on a Saturday. I let them have their first weekend. I imagined them settling in, Crystal likely oohing and awing over the view, Mark puffing up his chest, the conquering hero. I even pictured them using our bed, our sheets. The thought, instead of crippling me, fueled my resolve. On Monday morning, while they were likely enjoying a leisurely breakfast on the deck overlooking the lake, blissfully unaware, I set my own plan in motion. I contacted the local sheriff's department in Lakeside County. As the representative of the legal owner of the property, Precision Financial Solutions LLC, I reported unauthorized occupants. I emailed them a copy of the new deed, my company's articles of incorporation, and a formal letter requesting the trespassers be removed. I also called a local locksmith and a security company. And then I drove. The 3-hour drive to Lakeside Haven was a blur of righteous anger and steely determination. I timed my arrival for mid-afternoon, giving the sheriff's deputy, a polite but firm Sergeant Riley, ample time to get there. I met him at the bottom of the long, gravel driveway, out of sight of the house. "Mrs. Miller?" he asked, tipping his hat. "Or should I say, representative of Precision Financial Solutions?" "The latter for today, Sergeant," I said, handing him a hard copy of all the documents. "Thank you for your promptness." He reviewed them briefly. "Seems in order. Standard procedure. We'll ask them to vacate. If they refuse, it becomes a different matter, but usually folks comply when they see the badge and the paperwork." We drove up in his cruiser, my car following. My heart was pounding, a strange mix of dread and exhilaration. This was it. No going back. As we pulled up, I saw them. Mark and Crystal, lounging on the porch swing, drinks in hand, laughing. The image was so jarringly domestic, so offensive in its normalcy, that my resolve hardened to diamond. Crystal was young, blonde, pretty in a generic way, and looked thoroughly pleased with herself. Mark looked smug. Sergeant Riley got out, his presence immediately shattering their idyllic bubble. They both sat up, confusion clouding their faces. "Folks, sorry to bother you," Sergeant Riley began, his voice official. "I'm Sergeant Riley, with the Lakeside County Sheriff's Department. We've received a complaint regarding unauthorized individuals at this property." Mark stood up, attempting an air of authority. "Officer, there must be some mistake. This is my house." "Sir, according to our records, this property is owned by Precision Financial Solutions LLC," Riley stated, his gaze unwavering. "Are you a representative of that entity?" Mark scoffed. Precision what? No, this is my vacation home. Sarah and I own it. Well, mostly me, he winked at Crystal, who giggled, though a flicker of unease crossed her face. This was my cue. I stepped out of my car, sunglasses shielding my eyes, my expression unreadable. Mark's jaw dropped. His smugness evaporated, replaced by a ghastly pale shock. Sarah? What are you doing here? What is this nonsense? Hello, Mark, I said, my voice cool and even. Sergeant, I am Sarah Miller, sole proprietor of Precision Financial Solutions, LLC. This is indeed my company's property. I handed him my ID and my company card. He nodded. Ma'am, he turned back to Mark. Sir, it appears there's a clear ownership dispute, or rather, a clear owner and you are not it. The LLC holds the current deed. Mark stared at me, his face contorting with disbelief and dawning horror. Sarah, what the hell is this? You can't just. Actually, Mark, I can, I interrupted, my voice cutting through his bluster. And I did. Several weeks ago, in fact, while you were otherwise engaged. Remember that power of attorney you so generously signed? Turns out it was quite useful. Crystal, who had been watching this exchange like a tennis match, finally spoke, her voice shrill. Mark, what is she talking about? You said this house was yours. You said you were giving it to me. Mark ignored her, his eyes still locked on mine, a desperate, frantic look now replacing the shock. Sarah, this is insane. It's our house. We can talk about this. Please. There's nothing to talk about, Mark, I said, the ice in my voice chilling even myself. Precision Financial Solutions, LLC, does not wish for you or your guest to remain on its property. Sergeant Riley is here to ensure you vacate immediately. Vacate? Mark spluttered. But our things are here. We're here for 2 weeks. It's my honeymoon. He actually said it. Honeymoon. A bitter laugh almost escaped me. Your honeymoon, Mark? On my company's property? I think not. You have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings and leave. If anything belonging to the house, my company's house, is missing or damaged, I will press charges. Sergeant Riley stepped forward. Folks, I suggest you comply. We can make this easy, or we can make it difficult. Your choice. Crystal burst into tears. Mark, you told me you were leaving her. You said this was a new start for us. She looked from Mark's aghast face to my implacable one, and I saw the dawning realization that she'd been played, not just by Mark, but spectacularly by the wife he'd underestimated. The next hour was a symphony of chaos and humiliation for them. Mark alternated between begging, raging, and frantically trying to call his lawyer, who I knew wouldn't be able to do a damn thing. Crystal wailed, throwing clothes haphazardly into suitcases, her romantic getaway turning into a walk of shame. I stood on the porch, a silent sentinel, as they dragged their luggage to their rental car. The locksmith I'd called arrived and began changing the locks. The security team was already assessing for new camera placements. As Mark passed me, his face was a mask of fury and desperation. You'll pay for this, Sarah. This isn't legal. I'll sue you for everything. Consult your lawyer, Mark, I advised calmly. And then consult a good divorce attorney. You'll need one. David already has the papers drawn up. They'll be served by the end of the week. His face went white. He knew David. He knew how thorough David was. Crystal shot me a look of pure venom before flinging herself into the passenger seat. Mark got in, slammed the door, and spun gravel as he tore down the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust and the wreckage of his deceit behind. As the sound of their car faded, Sergeant Riley tipped his hat again. Well, ma'am, that was something. Anything else you need from us? No, Sergeant. Thank you for your professionalism. Just doing our job. You have a good day now. He got into his cruiser and left. I stood there for a long time, the scent of salt and pine filling my lungs. It smelled different now, cleaner, sharper. It smelled like freedom. The house felt different too. It wasn't ours anymore. It was mine, reclaimed, purged. Walking through the rooms, I felt a pang, Not for Mark, but for the innocent memories. They were still there, but they were now part of a past I was closing the door on. The haven wasn't tainted. It had been violated, and I had just performed a rather dramatic exorcism. The divorce was, as expected, messy. Mark tried to fight the haven transfer, but David had built an ironclad case. The power of attorney, the meticulously documented sale at fair market value, even if the funds were circular, the updated deed, it was all perfectly legal. Mark's infidelity, well documented by Ms. Albright, further weakened his position in other settlement negotiations. He ended up with far less than he'd arrogantly assumed he would. Crystal, unsurprisingly, disappeared from his life once the promise of a lavish lifestyle evaporated. I eventually sold the Lakeside Haven. The memories, even the reclaimed ones, were too intertwined with a life I no longer wanted. I used the proceeds to invest further in my company and to buy a small, charming cottage by the ocean, just for me. A place with no ghosts, only the promise of new sunrises. Sometimes late at night when the waves crash nearby, I think about that day at the Haven. There's no triumph in the traditional sense, no giddy joy. Instead, there's a quiet satisfaction, a sense of deeply earned peace. I hadn't just evicted a cheating husband and his mistress. I had evicted the version of myself who would tolerate disrespect, who would allow her strength to be underestimated. I had taken back my power, my property, and ultimately my life. And that was a foundation far more solid than any lakeside house. It was built on the unshakable bedrock of self-respect, meticulously reclaimed, one quiet, decisive action at a time. The numbers, as always, had told their story, and I had finally written my own ending. The aftermath was less a dramatic explosion and more a series of controlled demolitions. Mark, stripped of his perceived leverage with a haven, found himself in a remarkably weak negotiating position for the divorce. His bluster about suing me into oblivion quickly deflated when his own lawyers reviewed the paperwork David had so impeccably prepared. The power of attorney was valid. The sale transaction for the haven was, on paper, legitimate. He'd been outmaneuvered by the quiet accountant he'd taken for granted. His affair with Crystal became public knowledge within our social circle, not through any malicious campaign on my part, but because humiliated people talk, and Crystal, it turned out, was quite the talker once her dreams of being a pampered mistress dissolved. Mark's reputation, already shaky in his own professional sphere due to his increasing negligence, likely stemming from his distractions, took a significant hit. Clients became wary, partners distanced themselves. The image of the successful, devoted family man he'd so carefully cultivated crumbled. I, on the other hand, found an unexpected surge of focus and energy. Freed from the emotional drain of a failing marriage and the constant vigilance against deceit, I poured myself into my work at Precision Financial Solutions. My partners, who had known something was amiss but had politely kept their distance, were subtly supportive. Business thrived. My mind, once cluttered with suspicion and hurt, was now clear, sharp, and incisive. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, as these things often do. Mark tried every trick in the book to contest the division of assets, particularly targeting my shares in Precision Financial Solutions. But my company was established long before our marriage's serious decline, and my contributions were well documented. David, my stalwart lawyer, parried every thrust, his defense as meticulous as the Haven transfer had been. One particularly memorable moment came during a deposition. Mark's lawyer, a rather aggressive man clearly trying to rattle me, attempted to paint me as vindictive and emotionally unstable. "Mrs. Miller," he sneered, "isn't it true that you engineered the transfer of the Lakeside Haven purely out of spite, to humiliate your husband during what he considered a romantic getaway?" I met his gaze, my composure unwavering. "Mr. Henderson," I replied, my voice calm, "my actions concerning the Haven were to protect an asset legally transferred to my company, Precision Financial Solutions LLC, from unauthorized occupation. The timing of the occupants' getaway was their own choice, not mine. My primary concern was, and remains, the security and integrity of my company's property. Any emotional distress experienced by Mr. Miller or his companion was an unfortunate, but predictable, consequence of their decision to occupy a property that did not belong to them. The lawyer blinked, momentarily thrown by my dispassionate, business-like response. He'd expected tears or anger. He got neither. He got the CEO of Precision Financial Solutions. The final divorce decree came through almost a year after that fateful day at the Haven. Mark was left with his diminished business prospects, a significantly smaller portion of our marital assets than he'd anticipated, and the lingering shame of his exposed affair. He had to sell our primary residence, as he could no longer afford it on his own. I heard through the grapevine he moved into a small apartment, a far cry from the life he'd envisioned with Crystal. As for Crystal, her 15 minutes of infamy faded quickly. She was a footnote in Mark's downfall, a catalyst for a change that was, perhaps, long overdue. I felt a flicker of something akin to pity for her. She was young, naive, and had clearly believed Mark's lies. But she was also a willing participant in the destruction of a marriage, and choices have consequences. The sale of the Haven was surprisingly easy. It was a desirable property, and it sold quickly to a young family, their laughter echoing where mine and Mark's once had. I made sure to leave it immaculate, a blank slate for their own memories. There was a sense of closure in that transaction, a final severing of a tie that had bound me to a past self. My new cottage by the ocean was smaller, simpler, but infinitely more peaceful. It was filled with my things, chosen by me, for me. There were no shared histories lurking in the corners, no ghosts of betrayals. My children, initially shocked and saddened by the divorce, eventually came to understand. They saw their father's accountability in the situation and, over time, respected the strength I'd shown. Our relationships, strained during the initial turmoil, slowly healed and found a new, more honest footing. I didn't date for a long time. My focus was on rebuilding, rediscovering who Sarah Miller was outside the context of Mark's wife. I found I quite liked her. She was resilient, intelligent, and capable. She had faced betrayal head-on and emerged not unscathed, but whole. One evening, about 2 years after the divorce was finalized, I was walking along the beach near my cottage, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and purple. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Curiosity piqued, I answered. "Sarah?" The voice was hesitant, almost unrecognizable. It was Mark. "Yes," I replied, my tone neutral. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry," he sounded tired, defeated. "For everything. You didn't deserve any of it. I was a fool." I listened, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. The apology, which I once might have craved, now felt distant. It was for his benefit, not mine. "Thank you for saying that, Mark," I said, genuinely, but without warmth. "I appreciate it. I hope you find peace." "You too, Sarah. You sound like you have." "I have," I affirmed. "Goodbye, Mark." I hung up, took a deep breath of the salty air, and continued my walk. His apology didn't change what happened, nor did it lessen the pain I'd endured. But it did, perhaps, signify his own rock bottom, his own reckoning. My revenge, if you could call it that, was never about destroying Mark. It was about self-preservation, about reclaiming what was mine, not just property but dignity, autonomy, and peace of mind. The eviction at the Haven was certainly dramatic, a theatrical flourish on a deeply painful period. But the real victory wasn't the look on his face that day. It was the quiet confidence I felt walking away, the knowledge that I had navigated the storm with integrity and strength. Precision Financial Solutions, LLC continued to grow. I took on new partners, mentored young accountants, and found deep satisfaction in my work. The Haven became a story, a rather legendary one among my close friends and family, a testament to not messing with a woman who understands contracts and balance sheets. Life settled into a new rhythm, one of my own making. There were still moments of reflection, a wistfulness for the early, happy years with Mark, for the family unit we once were. But those moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the contentment of my present. I had learned that the end of one story, no matter how painful, can be the beginning of another, far more empowering one. And in this new story, I was the sole author, the protagonist, and the quiet, capable hero of my own life. The Haven eviction was merely a single, albeit pivotal, chapter. The rest of the book was still mine to write.